Awesome. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I am Pooja. So glad to be here. This is my first time at AI the Docs conference, and it's been great to watch and learn all the amazing content so far. I lead the platform Content Design Org at Autodesk, where I spend a big part of my day empowering teams to build lovable API and platform content experiences, and also to navigate the occasional semantic crisis. I'm based in San Francisco Bay Area, and I am joined here today with my awesome team member and co-lead Aman. And I'll hand it off to Aman for a quick intro as well.
Thank you, Pooja. Hi, all. I'm Aman Talwar. I am the content design manager. I work out of Pune, India, and basically, if I have to say one thing about myself, I love shopping and I'm a foodie. Thank you. Back to
Awesome.
you, Pooja.
Thank you, Aman. I'm gonna start sharing my screen real quick, and please let me know if y'all are able to see it. Okay. So today we are going to look at what happens when we treat OpenAPI not just as a backend formality, but as a frontline interface. Also, some snacks may be involved, so you've been warned. And great provocation from our previous keynote speaker. I think it's a great segue into some of the ideas we are asserting here in this talk. So let's get right into it. What's on the menu today? So we have making specs semantically expressive, what happens when specs power the UI, how to turn tech debt into AI affordances. But most importantly, how do we take care of the mindset shift in treating your spec like a user-facing doc, not an internal contract? But let's be honest, most OpenAPI specs today aren't written, they are generated. And you can feel it. They are structurally valid, but semantically hollow. Fields with no purpose, descriptions that restate the obvious, no examples, no constraints, no affordances for tools or humans. These specs weren't meant to be read, they were meant to pass your CI pipeline. That's the reality. I'm guessing most people here know or use the OpenAPI, but for those who don't, OpenAPI is a standardized way to describe REST APIs, things like what endpoints exist, what they accept, and what they return. It's written for machines, but increasingly it needs to make sense to humans too. But today that landscape is changing. They are being read by LLMs, exactly what we heard in the previous keynote, by agents, by tools that are trying to reason, generate, and compose. And guess what they find? Brittle scaffolding, right? Incomplete hints, no story, which means broken prompts and flaky chaining and co-pilots that are almost useless. These things tend to happen all the more. So when the spec is shallow, the experience is shallow as well. So let's walk through how to move from this brittle to semantically expressive specs. What you see here is a classic example of a spec that is generated. You can easily question, what does data one mean? Is it a snack name, a secret code, your dog's blood type? Similarly, val, like that's a rating. It's a what is the definition of that is missing here. There is zero context. There are no examples. This is less a schema and more a guessing game. Obviously, this is a little over exaggerated for this example we are showing here, but it's a classic we see each time we have auto-generated specs. What it should be is really, as we are describing here, a very well-formed spec example with clear descriptions and very, very well-defined object and parameter types. And this is where the AI sees structure, right? That's where it's able to look at purpose. It knows that rating must be an integer. It knows what values are valid and what they mean. And all of this leads us to basically say that LLMs love patterns. They learn from structure. They learn from specificity, from well-placed examples. A brittle spec invites hallucination, whereas a well-formed one guides intent. And this is really important for us to really grasp the gravity of the situation here when we say we are auto generating specs without enough human in the loop involvement. Let's anchor this in a tangible API, especially as we try to understand how do we design for LLM interpretability. So this is a fun API that we are trying to anchor this conversation for. It's called the Snack Buddy API. It's a fictional service that helps users order, review, and share snacks with friends. And as we look at some key aspects here, uh, what we've tried to do here is to show what we truly mean by descriptions being complete, descriptions being precise. And as you can tell, the LLM is very quick to pick these up, right? Which is why we want to make sure that descriptions actually describe. Similarly, we have our own ways of describing lorem ipsum in our JSON files. And that is, again, helpful to a developer when they are under time crunch, but it is so not helpful to that developer who's wanting to use your API. So making sure that your LLM examples are well defined and clear is very, very vital. Enums are like AI handrails. And this is, again, important as we think of readiness for LLMs and their ability to understand what is valid, what are the complete data values it needs to parse and read through. Error response rates, again, this might be a no-brainer. These are the things that we obsess a lot about as writers, but also making sure that the same principle extends into your spec file and not just your UI content. And lastly, understanding how to include or leave out information, right? Making sure that you're being explicit about value definitions. And this is, again, helpful when it comes to other deeper nuances within LLMs, especially with chaining, so on and so forth. So here's a nice little table that we've designed to really help distinguish what we mean by predictability and probability as models are navigating the specs. Just to ground these two definitions. So when we say predictability or LLM confidence, the model has seen this pattern and can reason with high certainty, right? And these are some clear writing patterns that we need to take care. And probabilistic, and this is where there's a lot of guessing involved, right? The model uses some general language priors or some nearby clues to guess, and that's where hallucination creeps in. So you don't want your LLM guessing what your API does. You want it to know what your API does, and that starts with the spec. Next, let's look at what happens when you already have a spec, right? It's a legacy spec, but what can you do to that legacy spec to bring it back to life? Now, legacy specs weren't written with LLMs in mind, most probably. They were probably auto-generated, bare bones, riddled with shortcuts and buried in that tech debt, which actually can be gold if you know how to mine it. So here's an example of what to do when you have an example that's akin to this, right? So here we see a classic example of, again, some similar themes of the spec not being well written and not enough care being taken. But at the same time, when you go in and have a structured way of organizing information, you make the job easier for your LLM to really understand field names, to really understand property values, to also understand what are valid and invalid inputs, right? And this goes a long way in avoiding the crisis that comes with hallucination downstream. So few things here, some tools and tactics that we think and we have been applying at Autodesk is we rely on linters heavily. We've built some very robust content standards. All of this is now being pre-fed into our models, and we are trying to utilize that as we are authoring. So again, the scholar that we heard from our keynote around the distinction between runtime and quote unquote write time, We want to do more things at the right time, and not at the runtime, because that is where we have more agency to influence the design and to influence the shape of the spec. Um, and I do want to sort of also, I really love this analogy. Specs age like bananas and not like wine. And what was valid 6 months ago might still technically pass your CI pipeline. Um, but semantically, contextually, or in terms of comprehension for your team and your LLMs, it's already brown, mushy, and confusing, right? So you want to take care of that. Legacy specs usually mirror backend code, not real world usage. So if you're uplifting them, talk to your support teams, talk to your users, understand what's confusing them, what's unclear to them. Look at analytics, right? Which endpoints are used versus which are ignored. Any copy paste drifts happening in the spec. Any duplicated objects that are diverging quietly without even us understanding. So these are all very good questions to ask, especially as you're thinking of uplifting an old spec back to life. We had to do that exercise as we were building SDKs, and we realized we did not even have a spec. So we had to go in and build a new spec from the ground up. Um, and this is a good segue into really looking at OpenAPI as a UX blueprint, right? Specs define the building blocks of UX. In Andre Karpathy's words, GUIs are useful. They are the highway to the brain. He recently gave a talk, and it was a very compelling assertion to understand that things that are so technical and so machine readable and code ready also need and could use a UI. Because when you treat specs as interaction artifacts, you don't just return data, you enable that intent resolution. So let's get into it. And this is where I'll hand off to Aman to walk us through a demo of it.
Thank you, Pooja. Greetings, everyone, again. Now, adding to what Pooja shared, the spec is no longer a blueprint, right? So I consider the spec purely as a user interface. And its most demanding new users aren't human anymore. They are the LLM agents, and we are increasingly relying on. If our UI is confusing, the AI gets confused, and our grand plans for automation fall flat. And we've been seeing that. So today, we'll explore how to design a better spec based on interface and see this evolution in action. So what I have here is a
I'm going to
small.
stop sharing so that Aman, you can share the page.
Thank you. So content will appear here. I cannot share.
Let's see if I have the web page open.
Yeah, I cannot share for some reason.
Let me go back. That's the OpenAPI imperative that I will be sharing.
That's right. Yes. Thank you. No, not this one, Pooja. There's a demo link. I'm sorry. Just replace the HTML with demo.html, please, instead of index.html. And I'm not sure why I'm not able to present it. It just says it throws me a form.
Can you try the share button rather than the present content button? Is it possible that this is what we're dealing with? It's a bit confusing here.
Okay,
And
just
the
say,
GUI, since we're talking about that.
I don't have a share button. I just have the present content button, and that doesn't seem to work, fortunately.
Let me know if it's this one.
No. Sorry about that.
Okay.
If you can just replace the last file name with demo.html, Pooja.
I tried doing that. Okay. I think this is it. Let's see. Thank you, folks, for being on the hold here. Okay. There you
Perfect.
go.
Thank you very much, Pooja. Okay, so this is a small working JavaScript application using the potential of Google Gemini. I wish I could actually, show you how this works because I have a file, that I wanted to, include in. Unfortunately, I just cannot present the working of this page here. So the idea was that this AI readiness monitor here on this page basically is an utility. It's an AI based application that could help you read the health of your AI spec. Now what you need to do here is load the spec from a file, and Pooja, if you could kindly select a YAML file or an OpenAPI spec file and use the load button.
Let's see. Let's see if I have any YAML. Okay.
Thank you very much, Pooja. Now, I would like you to click on the analyze specification. So that's a click which basically tells you how good your spec is, right? At this point of time, your spec rates 60, which basically means that it is missing some of the critical components. And as you scroll down, you'll see an analysis report, which basically gives you a clear identifier as to what are the critical, open API specification parameters and keys information that you're missing in your spec, which basically can when they're missing would probably impact how your AI reads your spec and what kind of information it actually generates. So what we're going to do here, what I've done here is there is a demo which basically is reading the spec that you've just included to basically show what the documentation would be generated. So if you can see, there are all those red ink, which basically says there's no description and the data is missing. Now to basically, so this is a situation we today are in most of the time. And what I've done here is, I have a fix it button on the screen, Pooja, and I would like you to click on that button. Now, here in this case, it's basically AI, but I want to put a disclaimer that this fix it could be a command line, application. It could be a full-fledged AI application. It could be something very customized to your organization. But whatever that is, it basically is based out of artificial intelligence, AI agents, and it seeks the power of AI to basically work on your spec and ensure that your spec is improved and improved drastically. Now, Pooja, if you could kindly please copy the content from the rendered spec. So just put your cursor inside Control A and Control C. Thank you very much. And if you drop the spec back again in the spec, Control B and click on Analyze Specification. What you see here is your semantic health goes to 100, because now if you scroll down further and see your analysis report, you'll see that all the checks that an AI agent is expecting in your spec are tagged off. So this is basically a way where I'm trying to project how specs, when they are not in a format that AI can read, basically provides all sorts of issues, and how you can use the power of AI. It could be tool, it could be anything, to basically improve your spec and thereby make sure that your AI reads it and identifies all the information. Now, what basically is it's interesting here is if you scroll further down on the page, Pooja. I'm sorry, I have to actually tell you to do this. I wish I was doing this and not you. This is fun. But if you scroll further down, the I've listed certain best practices. So these are the open API fields that I'm actually scanning through in your spec that you've launched, and then I'm trying to run certain validations to ensure that these specs are. So if these specs are, if these open API fields are identified, your health basically becomes 100. Now, there are certain funny examples here. It's like, what happens if your spec doesn't have information. So here's on the left side, you actually see a poor spec, and Pooja, you've already put up these examples in a way or not, in one way or other. But let's say if I have a question as to what this API is, now the agent would probably not know what this API is. And since I'm a foodie, I basically want to basically say snacks, and I think it's a 404, which is very dry. So you can actually see a contrast between what happens when your spec is not well written, when the information that is needed, is missing. And then what happens when you actually add this information. Now, I also want to put a disclaimer that this missing information, I mean, when you push this spec, it is still valid. Right, the spec goes through, it still generates documentation. But when I push this spec to an AI, now the AI agent is not able to find the information. It's valid, but it's missing certain critical components. So that these examples basically give you an idea of what is missing and how AI interprets the spec. If you go further down, Pooja, I've actually listed out. So based on my understanding and so what my experience within this domain, and I'm learning AI and everything around AI every day. I feel like there is a completely new workflow that has come into picture, which basically is bringing in the content writers, the technical writers, and the AI together. So it's mostly design component, which is where the developers come into picture. Once they've done the design, whichever format generated, we would like to actually leverage AI to improve that information, identify the gaps, fix it. And then we definitely need refinement into those specs. We need writers, because API specs by themselves cannot give you the complete picture. There has to be narrative docs. And that's where technical communicators come into picture. And finally, with all this refinement and the spec, the information is now ready for any AI agent to basically interact both by humans as by the LLMs. So what is the next move? The next move is a role change. The role change is, what are we looking at? We are looking at API designers mostly as interface architects. We want them to build the interface. We want them to make sure that the specs are technically accurate and all the required information is added. Now, what does it make for technical writers? Now, I look at technical writers as AI workflow managers. I want them to work with AI, prompt engineering, and spin that story, spin that narrative, so that it brings a complete picture, it brings a complete flow around the spec. And finally, the product leaders and management, I would like them to see this all as a strategic investment, an investment to basically uphold the quality of the product, and an investment that basically is needed at this time. With that, my final quote here is that the future is not about writing static pages, but it's all about architecting smarter interactions. Thank you very much, Pooja, and thanks for your help. Thank you very much.
Well, we've been getting a lot of questions around, is this a free tool and how can we use it? So feel free to take a look at this link. It's not a free tool, it's proprietary Autodesk, but we still wanted to make sure that we showed a version of it. We have another enterprise level version built in-house getting ready. And a big shout out to Aman in enabling that. Lastly, feel free to connect with us. We are on LinkedIn, a little too active than we should be. And thank you all so much for your enthusiasm today.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Pooja.
Thank you, Aman.